Look at that. Oh, that is beautiful. That is the best split of the day. Welcome back to the OSM channel. In today's video, I'd like to share with you a project that I've been working on. What is it? Well, it's a traditional dry stacked stone wall. And unfortunately, stone walls like these are not really being made that much anymore. Reason being, to manufacture a traditional dry stacked stone wall like this is incredibly labor intensive, but additionally, it requires a tremendous amount of skill. This has taken me about a week so far to make this, and that was with the help of a tractor. So it's coming out really nice, but it requires a tremendous amount of time, patience, and skill. Now, typically nowadays, when people want a stone wall, what do? Well, they'll call up a mason. Mason will come out and say, all right, we're gonna make you a stone wall. We're gonna do it quick and cheap as possible. So they'll mark out the area, dig a footing, lay down some stone, perhaps lay a concrete base, mortar together some cinder blocks, screw on or attach a wire lath, do a scratch coat, and then they'll glue on stone veneer. It looks nice, it goes up quick, but it will not last nearly as long as a traditional dry stack stone wall. You know, a modern veneer stone wall, if you get 50 years out of it, you're probably doing all right. A stone wall like this should last for hundreds of years. Now, the great thing about a traditional dry stack stone wall is as things shift, which they will shift, as things shift, you can simply shift them back into place, shim them back into place, and you can have this wall looking good as new for hundreds of years, especially if there's somebody who really cares enough about it to keep it looking nice. Now, I don't read a lot, but a book I read fairly recently was a book titled Stone to Stone. It's about the history of stone walls in New England. If you're into stonework and traditional stone walls like this, I highly recommend it. I'll leave a link for that book in the description down below. So the stone wall I'm building here follows the curvature of the road. So in order to get my first line that I've been following, I measured 10 feet off the road every 5 feet. Then I took a inverted paint can and drew out a line to follow. Now, what I recommend if you're building a traditional stone wall like this, set your big stones first. And if you have a tractor or some type of mechanical equipment to help you out, set those big stones first and try and have them flat on the ground. And then for the outside line, it's about 30 inches to the outside line. Mark my radius, and I've just been following that line. This is a very helpful tool here that I manufactured. So the bottom of the stone wall, about 30 inches wide, but as we come up, this marks where the height or the top of the rock wall will approximately be, which is about 2 feet high. But what I want to highlight here is as I build this up, the wall actually goes in about 4 inches. See how we're wider on the bottom? Now we're around the top, and that's really important because that really helps to prevent this wall from blowing out over the years. If anything, it's going to want to push in. Additionally, when I'm laying these stones, I'm not always worried about the face of the stone being on the outside. If you really want this wall to lock together, you have to have these stones laying into the wall. And whenever you set a stone, you got to take all your scrap pieces and really jam it in there and ensure that that stone is flat and it's not prone to rocking. So, as you can see, this wall is coming out quite beautifully thus far. Now, if you plan to manufacture a dry stacked stone wall like I'm doing here, I hope that you do, you'll quickly realize one of the biggest challenges you're going to face is finding rocks that have nice flat faces. In my opinion, what separates a mediocre looking rock wall and a high-end, really well constructed stone wall is how flat the face of the stones are. You want everything flat and smooth as possible. The challenge is when you're using random boulders from around your yard, only about 5% of the stones are going to have a really nice face in which you can really use. So what do? Well, you can either stack the stones to the best of your ability, or you can try and split these stones and make your own faces. Now, the great thing about today, we have some wonderful tooling to make that job much easier, such as hammer drills, feathers, and wedges. They also have carbide-tipped chisels and hammers. The nice thing about the carbide-tipped hammers and chisels is the carbide is much harder than the stone. Now, those tools are very expensive. I'd love to add some to the arsenal. I just can't afford it right now, but I'll show you where to get them. Now, I'm going to show you how to split some stones with traditional tools and traditional methods. I mean, It's slower, it's more labor intensive, but this is the traditional way of doing it. This is how people have been doing this for thousands of years. A few tips I have for you: get some good heavy duty masonry chisels, and at the end of every day, sharpen the chisels. Nice 45-degree angle on them. You want these as sharp as possible, but they will dull out very quickly, of course, because these aren't carbide. You know, they're probably just some traditional tool steel. Now let me move the camera a little bit closer. We'll take a closer look at this rock, and I'll show you some things to look for if you're trying to put a nice face on a random stone that you found from around your yard. Now, because we're not using an SDS hammer drill and some feathers and wedges or carbide tip chisel, you know, we're just using what we have here, we need every advantage we can get. So this is a rock I want to split. I want to put a nice face on it. You know, you look at this rock right now, there's not really a nice flat face. So when I'm sizing up a rock, there's a few things I'm looking for. For one, I'm looking at, is there a face in which the rock may have fractured from in the past? Like, I look at this plane right here, and it looks like it's kind of split in this direction before. So I want to split the rock in that same direction. Another thing I'll look for, are there currently any fault lines or cracks in the rock? And it may be kind of hard to see, but there's actually a nice crack that's formed right here, and this would be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chisel and I'm going to scribe the line where I want to split this rock, and I'm trying to follow that existing fault line to an extent. And also on the sides, I want a nice square cut. So I'm just going to kind of scribe out a line where I want to chisel the rock. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Look to see if there's any fault line over here, which there actually is. I'm going to try and split it a little bit further back. So we're going to do a few taps on the top, and then we're going to focus on the sides. In the first go around, you know, we're just kind of marking at our line, and we're starting to crack the rock. After we get our line kind of set and fractured into the rock, then we can start wailing on this rock a little bit harder. Now, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but the key is patience and following a nice straight line and looking for those fractures. Okay, so we got this stone to split. It wasn't a perfect split. It's relatively flat, but we have this chunk here that I would like to take off, and that's not a big deal. Which, if we scribe the underside of the rock, this probably would have been much flatter. But no matter, we should be able to take this chunk off. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna flip the rock around now. And you can see that line where it chiseled to. Right, so I chiseled to here, but I didn't do here. But it's not a big deal, because we should be able to take this off with relative ease. So I'm going to look down the line here. I'm just going to etch with the corner of a chisel where I want to cut this off. So we have a nice straight line. And then we're going to gently scribe a line in here with the chisel. Light taps, just following that line first pass. You could face the chisel inwards a little bit. So I just want to show you this. Here's the line I've been following. Now if we look where this chunk meets the face, since I started chiseling, this gap actually started to open, which is a good sign. That means if I keep following this line with the chisel, this whole chunk should peel right off with ease. And we'll have a really nice flat face. So I got this rock as flat as I was able to get it by way of my basic chisels, and that's a really nice face. It'll look really nice on the front of the rock wall. I was trying to get this a little bit flatter. There's actually a carbide tip point chisel that would have been perfect for taking this chunk out of here, but I think that chisel is probably like $80, so can't really justify buying one of those for this project. But another thing I'm noticing too, if you look, the rock changes. This is like a bluish color, as where this is a darker color. You can also tell that by way of this fault line right here. So this rock, for whatever reason, is probably a little bit less prone to splitting, which when you're splitting rocks, sometimes it doesn't always work out, but you adapt. Like if I was really unhappy with this, the next move I'd probably make would be to split right here, and then I'd get a nice square split right here, and then I'd have this chunk and this chunk if I wanted, but I'm just gonna use this as is. So that was fun. Let's try and split another one. Now I'm thinking this rock will go pretty easy. I'm noticing a fault line forming here. So we'll just do a line all the way around the rock and see if we can get it to split right down the middle. Another thing you could do, I saw the old timers doing online, was they actually sounded out the rock and they were listening for faults in the rock. Kind of hard to tell with this rock, but you clearly have a fault line here, and we're just going to follow that. And that one didn't work out as well. You can still try and cut this chunk off, but this is a softer rock. Not 100% sure what this is. We could take our brick hammer and we can knock some of these high spots off. Very soft rock. Imagine this is some type of sediment rock. So you can see this one didn't really work out the way we had hoped, but we still have a halfway decent face if we wanted to use this. That just goes to show you, depending on what type of rock you're splitting, may affect how nice and flat the face is. So let's throw this one aside and try another. So this rock actually has a nice flat face right here, and I really could use this face in the wall. The only trouble is this protrusion makes it very difficult for this piece to fit in the wall. So we're going to try and chisel this off. Thinking we'll chisel the top and bottom, try and create a fault line, and then try and knock this chunk off. So let's see how this goes. So we got a chunk. You can see the line we were chasing. So now let's try and clean this up with our brick hammer. So that's the line I was working on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the face of the hammer and hit at a little bit of an angle, like I'm trying to knock this piece away from the main body of rock. Just follow that line. Not bad. We'll face this up a little bit more. If we want, we could go to our wide chisel now. Beauty. That's pretty good. Now clearly I'm not the best at this. You get the idea. think if I had some nicer tools, I could make much nicer faces, but we did what we intended to do here. We have about a 90-degree angle now. Could try and chip some of this off if we wanted to, but I don't mind that. So you could see the edges on the chisels get beat up very quickly. So at the end of every day, I take these over on the bench grinder and just make a nice sharp point, and that really helps when you're trying to break these apart. Like that one's really beat up. Actually didn't really use the long guy, but I also want to talk about this brick hammer, masonry hammer, whatever you want to call it. I use this a lot for shaping up little protrusions that just don't allow the rock to fit properly. So for example, like we have a little fault line right here, and as opposed to using a chisel to break this off, which you absolutely could do, sometimes it's quicker just to take the brick hammer, take the head of the hammer, and you give this a few blows and you can knock chunks off. So like I see the fault line right here where I want to follow. Now the fault line kind of curves in, so I'm actually going to start right here. And you see how I made that kind of nice and flat? And if I wanted to keep taking this back, all I would do is take the hammer and I'd angle the face in a little bit, and you could see how I could chip some of this edge off a little bit at a time, just light blows. See how we're just taking little chips off? And then if there's like a little chunk right in there, then I'll take the corner of the head of the hammer and start wailing on that. You can try the back if you want. Which I don't really use the back of the hammer too much. I really use this to split like bluestone. If I want a little chunk of blue, I'll take the bluestone, have it stand up, and just kind of take the back and try and fracture that stone, which is nice. But this little brick hammer is really handy for shaping stones. Let's try one more. Let's see if we can split this big guy. Look at that. Oh, that is beautiful. That is the best split of the day. That just goes to show you, you don't have to have any of these fancy carbide tip chisels or an SDS hammer drill and feathers and wedges. If you have some basic masonry chisels, 2-pound sledge, and a little bit of patience, you can do some really nice stone work. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'll leave links for the tools I used today, as well as the tools I recommend in the description down below. Also, be sure to check out that book I recommended, Stone to Stone. Really interesting read. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.